Hey folks, it's Ardwulf. Welcome. Today for Traveler Tuesday, we are going to take a look at this book from Mongoose Publishing. This is the Traveler Companion. It is for Mongoose Traveler 2nd edition, and this is a 2019 release, so it's not brand new. If you are going to get yourself involved into Mongoose Traveler and want some optional and or additional rules for things, this is one of the first places I would take a look at. So we're going to look in here and see what it contains so that you can judge for yourself whether you want this as an addendum to your Traveler rules set if you're using Mongoose 2nd edition. I will also point out that even though this is for Mongoose Traveler 2nd edition, there is a great deal of intercompatibility between either edition of Mongoose Traveler and previous editions of Traveler, including Classic Traveler and Mega Traveler and Traveler 4th edition. A little less so with Traveler 4th edition because it uses a different die mechanic and the skills scale a little bit differently. Still not very difficult to do conversions, but a little harder than it would be for Classic Traveler or Mega Traveler, any edition of Classic Traveler too. So let's see what we get. It's a nice hardcover. I think this is 168 pages, not counting the end pages. Classic Traveler credits by Mark Miller and a bunch of other GDW luminaries. Mongoose Traveler author Martin J. Doherty. That's the 2nd edition. And some other additional contributors as well. Special thanks to Mark Miller and Lauren Wiseman. I don't remember if Lauren Wiseman was still around. He has passed away, and I don't know if he was still around when this thing was created. So, all right. So, different characteristics. So, there is an alternate characteristic range for modifiers above scores of, say, 18, which you normally don't see in Traveler. Normally, the absolute cap is about 15. We have, looks like a wealth characteristic, which would be an alternative way to handle buying things. It's kind of like some of the modern story-driven type game systems. Instead of having you keep track of money, they'll have a statistic that you use instead, and you make a roll against that statistic to see if you can buy stuff. This doesn't quite work that way. This just kind of gives you a rating and then gives you kind of a credit amount that you can do. Although it looks like you can make... Okay, so this is the limit beneath which you don't have to make a wealth check. And then if you fail, you permanently reduce wealth by 1. There's a luck characteristic. What does this do? You can expend luck on a temporary basis, which gives you a DM +1 to a roll. How do you get it back? That's a good question. All luck points expended in this way are regained at the end of an adventure. That would really change the game flow, I think. There's nothing wrong with that, but I would advise caution and due consideration before using it. There's a morale characteristic. This is something I would probably want to use for NPCs rather than PCs per se. There's a sanity characteristic if you want to do a Traveler game much like, say, Alien, a more horror-oriented game. Here's some additional guidelines for social standing, or an alternate set of guidelines for social standing. Also some notes on effective social standing. Social standing is one of those things, it's kind of a weird inclusion in Traveler, a lot of people feel, and there's always been, let's say the rules have always given you a lot of flexibility. That's a good way to put it, that they haven't given you much guidance on how to actually use that in play. So alternate optional Traveler character creation rules. Iron Man. So this is the legendary Traveler kill your character in character creation. I wouldn't do that in Mongoose Traveler 2nd edition because the process takes too long. One of the reasons why it's much, much less ridiculous than it seems in Classic Traveler, which is the last version of Traveler that was mandatory, was Classic Traveler, the original version, is that character generation takes just a couple minutes. I mean, it's so fast that, I died, I have to start over. I actually have a cute idea that maybe I'll do a video on at some point about how to get story out of those dead characters in character creation. In this case, you pick from the skills. So you have The solo generation. So the Mongoose Traveler, I think both editions have this connection rule where you can get additional skills by tying your backstory as you kind of develop it during character creation to that of the other PCs. This lets you do it by yourself, which is a good idea. Let's say your character gets killed and you have to make a replacement character. Well, you can kind of tie it in, but you kind of miss out on the ability to have done it on the fly, as it were. So this lets you just do it. And I kind of like that that's available. Here's a little note on maximum terms, which is something that you can definitely do regardless of this being in here or not. You can say, as the game master or referee, hey, don't take more than 6 or 7 or whatever it is terms. I didn't see any real reason to do that. There is a point of diminishing returns in Traveler character creation where you start to accrue aging issues, and you just want to get started at that point. Here is all the rules you need to make BWAP characters, looks like. The BWAPs are an imperial race. They are kind of known to be really good bureaucrats, according to the common stereotype, and they're like these little lizard guys. Package-based character creation. So this is another interesting thing where you pick these background packages rather than having to go through the other stuff, and then you take career packages on top of that, and that gives you pretty much everything that you need. One of the differences between Classic Traveler and the Mongoose editions is that the characters exit character creation with more skills than in Classic Traveler, or probably Mega Traveler as well. And that's just because there's a much more fully developed character creation system than in Classic Traveler. The range of skills from, say, 0 to 3, maybe 4, is about the same, but you end up with more skills. But you could see from these packages, some bunch of them are going to be at 0. Classic Traveler didn't really have 0 level skills at first. That was something that was added a little bit later. Here's a point buy system. I personally think that Traveler character creation in general, across all versions of Traveler, is one of the joys of Traveler, and I would not favorably view replacing it with a point buy system. But it could be that you have a player who absolutely insists that that's what they want. Allies, contacts, rivals, and enemies. This is something that is already in the game. This looks like it fleshes that out. Power and influence ratings. Special characteristics. So what are the special characters? Oh, so these are like random oddity quirk type things. Individual is recently married or has experienced some other life-changing event that creates new responsibilities. I'd definitely consider using this. Pre-career options. So there are pre-career options in Mongoose Traveler 2nd Edition. You can go to university or you can go to a military academy. This gives you more additional pre-career options. So you could have a colonial upgrade, merchant academy, which is first I've seen of that actually is in this book, a psionic community if you came from some cult, School of Hard Knocks, or Spacer community. Here are some. I'll tell you, I'm not crazy about the additional careers. The Truther and the Believer. They're fine. They're not unbalanced. I just don't, these are a different type of career than you would have seen in the rest of the game, and I don't see any reason for these to be here. I don't know that I would disallow this, but I don't find these particularly appealing. I mean, what does it mean? Your specializations for Truther are minor following, major following, or patronage. For Believer, it's mainstream believer, missionary, humanitarian, or holy warrior. Actually, this I could see a character wanting type of this type of thing. If you want like to do like a cleric or a shepherd book type of character, for example, this is not a bad choice. Although shepherd book has some other things going on in his background as well. Another thing that people think is super weird at first about Traveler is that it's not true to say that there's no character advancement after character creation. However, changing stat and skill levels is very difficult outside of character creation. This is a set of mechanisms that help you put that in if you want it. All you have to really recognize, I think, is that in Traveler, the progression that your character experiences is story progression and the accumulation of wealth. rather than necessarily their stats getting better. I think there are other ways to do this that I think are better. But that said, this is something that a lot of people think is very strange that Traveler does not include. So if you want that, it's here. I'm going to sound super old school and curmudgeonly here. Broad skills. So this is basically a restructure of the skill system that creates a much smaller number of much broader skills and then lets you specialize in those. Alternate playstyles. Narrative, task, resolution. Well, that's very interesting. The mundane events check. Recognition of competence. This is kind of how I play. If you... I don't require rolls for everything, right? If you're, say, engineering 2 and you need to do routine maintenance, I'm not going to make you check that. I'll just say it takes 2 hours or whatever to run these routine checks. And I think my preference for that is to avoid rolling when it's either not a challenging task or the outcome of the test is not going to be interesting. That's something I might talk about in a later video. Okay, so here's ammo expenditure rules. This is alternate ammo expenditure where you have a reload threshold as opposed to counting bullets, which is fine. A lot of people don't like to do that kind of stuff. Alternate initiative, but I will say this, that if you get into combats indiscriminately in Traveler, you're likely to get killed. So it's not certainly the most lethal RPG set of rules, but it's not super easy, and recovery from injury can take quite a while and be quite expensive. So combat mishaps, hit locations, these are all additional options. Wound effects, weapon scanners and searches. This is more of some stuff that's, how to handle some of the technology in the setting. Gravity and related effects. So there's the discussion. This has actually always there's been supplementary materials on handling gravity in hostile environments and stuff like that in Traveler for a very, very long time. But there's never really been a ton of support for it in the core rules, in really any edition that I could think of. Maybe there are some exceptions to that if I thought about it harder. But you have various levels of gravity here and what that actually corresponds to, the effects of that. So here we're talking about much more fully fleshed out rules for this. I have always found that if you just wing that, it's pretty much fine. If it's super high gravity, you're at -2 to strength related stuff or whatever. But if you want hard rules for that, here it is. Even falling damage changes based on the gravity. Similarly, here's some stuff for atmosphere and vacuum. Decompression. Explosive decompression. What does this do? Okay, so this does you damage, but not instantaneously. Which is accurate, by the way. There have been astronauts who have been accidentally decompressed in this way, and they did not explode like they did in Outland. Partial exposure in suit breaches, high pressure. Again, same type of thing. If you feel you need rules for this, they're here. It's pretty easy to wing that, I think. Diseases, toxins, and chemicals. How to detect those, exposure, delay, and interval. A variety of different poison type things. And a variety of diseases, which you can definitely use as templates for your own diseases. Starvation and thirst for those of you who have an interest in doing a survival-oriented Traveler campaign. You might find this of use. Same thing with effects of temperature. This would be good to employ this kind of thing if you're going to run the old adventures marooned or marooned alone. The latter of which is actually an adventure intended for one player. Terrain, conditions, and movement, same type of thing. Definitely could see the use for a lot of these. Here's some additional stuff on animal encounters. Some special animal traits. And some example critters. Quite a few, actually, example critters. You just can't have enough of these things, though, so... honestly, they could, and I'm a little surprised that they haven't done an entire book on like a bestiary. I hate to use that term because it's a term normally associated with fantasy games. Now there is a book called Animal Encounters. There's one for the Classic Traveler system, and Mongoose Traveler did one for first edition. And a lot of the books have additional animal encounter type things. But it would be cool to have like a really comprehensive reference for stuff like that. You'd probably have to limit it to, say, do one for the Spinner Marches, to be honest about it. That's probably be the right way to do it. And if you do that, then I'm not sure if utility of such a book would suffer. Vehicle damage, refereeing Traveler. So here is a bunch of just additional stuff about how to run the game, which is always useful. Well, almost always useful. I have seen games that give bad advice. How to interpret UWP data. This is the Universal World Profile, that 7-8-digit number of alphanumeric characters that tells you what a world is like, and then you have to figure out what it is actually like on the ground from those numbers. This is something I've been doing for a long time with those numbers. But somebody who's not used to that definitely could get a lot of use out of reading this section. Traveler Map and the Wiki. So I've talked about travelermap.com before in the past. It is an amazing resource that's basically live data, and there's a whole bunch of different things you can view on there. I heartily endorse going there and exploring that. I'll put a link in the video description again. So this is like a whole guide on how to use it, actually, which is pretty awesome. Starports and spaceports. It's always nice to see additional information on this. A lot of this is probably material that has appeared in the past in various editions of Traveler and in various books, but it's kind of nice to have all this stuff in one consolidated place. Starport law, which is, of course, not necessarily the same. And in fact, usually it isn't the same as local law, because the starport is imperial in the Imperium. Starports are imperial territory and are not subject to local laws, which can create all kind of adventure hooks right there. Legalities and law breaking. Not that player characters would ever engage in such activities. Slower than light. So this is interesting here, actually. This talks about slower than light travel. And then we have some additional stuff that you can do with jump drives, including a lot of material on how jump drives work. And some ways to modify that. And then you have alternate jump operations, including instant jump and real space transit. Now, these if you change significantly the way, pretty much from here back, if you employ any of this material to change the way jump drive affects interstellar travel, you're probably not doing any significant damage to the official travel universe. From here on, you would be. Instantaneous jump would definitely make a huge difference to the Traveler universe. But, that's not to say that you're obligated to use the official Traveler universe in any way. Lots of people have been and continue to make their own universes in Traveler, and that is something that Traveler has always given you all the stuff you need to do. All the tools you need are in the book, whatever version of Traveler we're talking about. Traveling in normal space, there's some additional material on this. Mines. That's very specific to get its own chapter. Gas giant operations. This could be useful. You could get some good material out of here. Transponders, registry, and mortgages. This is more of the Starship operations type of stuff. This talks about ship transponders that ID the ship, how ship mortgages work, stuff like that. Yes, you can owe a mortgage in Traveler. It's kind of one of the cool things. It's one of the things that motivates your characters to go out and do stuff, because you have to make the payments on the ship. Missiles and torpedoes. This was the subject of an entire supplement back in the day. This is definitely less material than you were getting there. Starship automation, gravitic shielding, including stuff that covers tech levels all the way up to tech level 21. Starship weaponry. So this is additional Starship weaponry, including antimatter weapons, which are quite high tech level, as you'd expect. And then we have an index, a relatively rudimentary index. So I wanted to get a chance to show off the contents of this book, because it's a book that gets highly recommended. I know Seth Shorkowski has Highly recommended it as an immediate addition to your Traveler Mongoose Traveler Second Edition library. I agree with that, although I would consider the vehicle books to be sooner purchases, but that said, I have them all. So I do highly recommend it as an addendum to running a Traveler campaign. I don't think you particularly need to pick it up if you're a player, but if you're a referee, then I think you probably want to at least examine some of the options available in here and maybe introduce them to your campaign. So hopefully you've enjoyed watching the video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up. Please click the bell notification and subscribe to the channel. And until next time, happy gaming.